Now, Luke is going to say the same thing, okay? But Matthew will add an interesting detail here. And what's interesting is he may have gotten something wrong here. Either that or maybe a later scribe. But Matthew 21 verse 2 puts it in these terms. Ye shall find an ass tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them unto me. So in the Matthew version, there's two animals, not just one. Mark just mentions one. Luke just mentions one. John just mentions one. So Matthew's the odd man out. And why mention two? Well, because of an Old Testament verse of Scripture that Matthew's going to want to make sure that his audience knows all about. Remember, Matthew's the one that quotes Old Testament prophecy all the time, every chance that he can. This one's an interesting one. It's in Zechariah chapter 9, and Zechariah in some ways was a mini Isaiah, a mini messianic prophet. Isaiah was a major prophet that was messianic through and through. Zechariah was a minor prophet, but he was just as messianic. And some powerful prophecies of Jesus come out in the message of Zechariah. This one is in chapter 9, verse 9, and it says, Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. Now we're going to come back and unpack every phrase here because it's powerful. But notice how it ends with two animals. He's riding on an ass and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And so it seems that Matthew is taking that and making sure that it follows exactly the way it's described. And so let's make sure there's two animals. And sure enough, in a lot of the paintings and artwork that you see of the triumphal entry, there's two animals. Jesus is riding on one of them, and then there's another right alongside. Now, that's possible. There could have been two. But then again, Mark, Luke, and John all mention one. And in fact, the JST of Matthew puts it back down to one also. So even Joseph Smith, by inspiration, is saying, no, there's not two animals, there's just one. So what's Zechariah up to? Oh yeah, if he's a messianic prophet, and often Old Testament prophets were also poets, that they would couch their prophecies and revelations in these epic poetry. That's Isaiah for you, to a T. It's also Zechariah. And in Hebrew poetry is all about parallelism, where it's not the sound of a word that's repeating, it's the idea behind those words being repeated. He'll say something and then say something again in slightly different terms. That's synonymous parallelism. And we talked about that when we studied Isaiah last year. Well, if it's synonymous parallelism, then he's just saying the same idea twice. And the first round of the rhyme is he's going to ride upon an ass. And then let me say this again in other terms. It will be upon a colt, the foal of an ass. So not even a donkey, but a young donkey. Maybe, again, no wonder nobody's ever sat on it. This is a little frisky animal that nobody's been able to tame yet. Well, wait for Jesus. If we understand the parallelism, you'll start to see it in the rest of what Zechariah said. And it's so beautiful what's being suggested here. Start at the top. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. And now let me repeat the idea. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Daughter of Zion, daughter of Jerusalem, those are obvious parallels. Rejoice greatly, shout. This is where we get, we'll sing and we'll shout with the armies of heaven. And we're going to see some more parallels to temple dedications in a moment. But to see this rejoicing, this celebration is what's being described. Why? Because thy king cometh unto thee. Not only is salvation coming into Jericho, the king of salvation, the King of Kings himself, is coming into this house, the house of Israel. The king is coming, so of course there's cause to rejoice greatly. Of course there's reason to sing and shout. The king cometh, and then notice how he's described. How's this for another parallel? He is just, and in the next adjective, he is lowly. Squeezed between them, he has salvation. That's what he's bringing. Salvation is coming to this house. Jeshua, Joshua, Jesus is coming in. The King cometh. And he's just and he's lowly. No wonder he's riding upon an ass. Let me remind you, repeat it, a colt, the foal of an ass. You see, here's what we need to understand. Ever since the days of King Saul, first king of united Israel, and then on to David and Solomon and their descendants, whenever there was a rightful king on the throne in Jerusalem, there would be a re-enthronement ritual that the people would participate in every year. A chance to reconfirm that we have a rightful king here, and we can rejoice over that blessing. Now, the way that ritual would work is the king would go east of Jerusalem and would ride into town at their own triumphal entry, coming down the Mount of Olives and across the Kidron Valley, where Gethsemane is, and then in through the city gates to reassert themselves on the throne of Judah. And the kind of animal they would ride in on was a donkey. You see, if they came in on some mighty steed, some war horse, it was a sense of, what, did you conquer us? Because Jews have had plenty of experience with that too. And unrightful kings that are usurping the throne. A rightful one doesn't have to show off his power. He deserves to be here. A rightful one will be a prince of peace, because he's not trying to take over. He's not conquering us. We want him here. So come on in and bring your peace with you. So just a gentle donkey, a work animal, a beast of burden. This king is coming to unburden us, to help bear our burdens with us. This is the king we want on the throne. Now, think of what Jesus is enacting here. This is the re-enthronement ritual. By the time it comes to Zechariah, people are so used to this that Zechariah uses that to be messianic, that the real king will someday come. Oh, this re-enthronement was in some ways a pre-enthronement. The one who truly has the right to rule and reign is a king of kings and Lord of lords. And when he comes, oh, you want to talk about reason to rejoice greatly? Oh yeah. Reason to sing and shout? You better believe it, because the greatest king of all is coming into his kingdom. And then don't forget the adjectives that Zechariah used. Just and lowly. Just. He deserves to be here. He's the rightful ruler. He doesn't have to come in on a war horse. This is not some military usurper. No, he's just. And he can afford to be lowly because we want him here. Come in on this donkey, which is exactly what Jesus is doing.